By Professor Mia Swart, who is a law expert and a research director of the Democracy and Governance Unit of the Human Science Research Council. Professor Swart, thank you very much indeed for your time. Let's start off, just break it down for us in terms of the Constitutional Court declaring that the settlement agreement, the obligation to pay the sum of 17.3 million rand, I guess it was 10 million rand after you do the math, and Mr. Nqasana's vacation of office. Why was that constitutionally invalid?
Well, it was invalid because President Zuma abused his power to offer that money. It really seemed like he was buying off Nqasana as if he was bribing him to leave, because it became very inconvenient for him to have Nqasana in that post. And the Constitution clearly states that, the President cannot abuse his influence or interfere in the independence of the NPA.
Our understanding is that the court ruled that Shaun Abrahams' appointment was invalid because he had benefited from former President Jacob Zuma's abuse of power, quote and unquote. How would you say that Advocate Abrahams had benefited from this?
Well, quite obviously, he stepped into the shoes of Nqasana. He was elevated to that very prominent position. So this is how he benefited. It was tremendously good for his career.
The Constitutional Court also found that certain sections of the NPA Act were constitutionally invalid. Parliament has been given, I understand, 18 months to amend the NPA Act. Which sections need some attention and why?
Well, really, it has to do with the discretion that can be exercised by the NDPP. I'm not too familiar with the exact sections. I would have to study that.
Mm-hmm. It was also interesting to note, Professor Swart, that there was a sentiment echoed about the settlement, and seemingly it was exorbitant. Mr. Nqasana had to pay back, needs to pay back around 10 million rand or so. From your understanding, what is the actual sum that needs to be paid, or settlement figure that normally is paid in this regard?
Well, I don't know if there is a normal standard, but certainly he now has to pay back 10 million rands. And I understand that the remaining amount would be used for tax purposes. So he would not benefit from any of that. He would not be able to keep any of that money. I think it's very good that the court emphasized that it would not, that it didn't reflect well on him, the fact that he took the money in the first place, because he was not entitled to a payout the equivalent of 10 years of work. And I think this sends, a more important message more generally, that people shouldn't accept golden handshakes without blinking, that is, morally dubious in itself. And I think it played a role in the court assessing Nqasana's character as being a fit and proper person for this position.
With regards to the former President Jacob Zuma, we heard phrases like abuse of power. Could there be any legal repercussions in terms of the former president? Could he face any legal repercussions?
Well, one would hope so. One would hope that this, would be something that he would be held accountable for. But we see that it is now the very person, right, that needs to be appointed by Ramaphosa that would have to hold him accountable for this. So one would hope that President Ramaphosa would now make a very wise choice in appointing a new head as soon as possible, so that there can be continuity, so that there can be, some healing in the NPA. And certainly, President Zuma, former President Zuma already has so many charges against him that, this would just be, like another drop in the ocean. But it shouldn't slip away, there should be, a case should be made against this. Otherwise, it could happen again.
Let's just talk about this process. The president has been given 90 days to appoint a new NDPP. In terms of this process, shed some light for us, Professor Swart, in terms of, is it the sole prerogative of the president to appoint the NDPP?
Yes, it is. The Constitution says that it's the President of the Republic that appoints the NDPP for a period of 10 years. Lately, there has been, talk of involving the NA, the National Assembly, Parliament in this project, of appointing the new NDPP, possibly even involving the public. Since we involve the public, when judges are appointed, some are saying this should happen. But essentially, I think it reflects terribly badly on the ANC that they have been unable to fill this position. And one would expect someone holding the grave, serious position of the Presidency of South Africa to be able to exercise his judgment in a reliable and wise way, and that he wouldn't it wouldn't require a constitutional amendment. One doesn't want to tamper with the Constitution, and it would be very sad if one has to amend the Constitution just because the president is incapable of doing his job.
Professor Swart, with regards to Shaun Abrahams, advocate Shaun Abrahams, and look, there was questions about his appointment. Now, the decisions that he has made during his tenure, I understand, still stands. Just help us understand the logic with regards to that.
Okay, so he would stay, as far as I understand your question, he would stay in his position until the new NDPP is appointed. And the president has 90 days to appoint a new NDPP. So Shaun Abrahams, he has been sort of ordered to vacate his position, but certainly until and unless an acting NDPP is appointed, he would still formally be in that position.
That despite the question marks about his appointment?
But you're right,
yeah.
It is fairly confusing.
Yeah. Professor, that's still, in terms of his appointment, there were question marks with regards to that, the court ruled. So despite that, all the decisions that he has made thus far still stands?
Absolutely.
Okay, Professor Swart, thank you very much indeed for your time. That's where we'll have to leave it. That was Professor Mia Swart, who is the law expert and research director of the Democracy and Governance Unit of the Human Science Research Council. Thank you very much indeed for your time.